Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Strong Christian Female podcast. And this week is a week that it's only been a few weeks since Isaiah scheduled with me, but this is a topic I have been very weighted with for years. Most of you know about my human trafficking education that I do as a media producer and also an educator. And not everyone knows that story, but it was something I sort of fell into, so to speak. But being in that world has opened my eyes to so many things that I think people keep secret, and that's the only way they know about it is in their secret lives. Or maybe people know someone who struggles with it, or maybe they themselves have never heard of it, or they don't see why it's such a big deal because unfortunately the church is not doing a very good job talking about these heavy, very real, very present issues in our society that aren't outside the church anymore, y'all. They are inside the church, very present inside the church. And yet, I want to, we always have honest conversations here. We want to speak truth and life into an actual issue. So today our topic is going to center around pornography and pornography addiction. And I want to welcome Isaiah Cruz to the show. Isaiah, thank you so much for being here. I know, as you know, I've introduced you beforehand, but can you just give us a little brief synopsis of what it is you do in this area and who you are?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. So, like you said, I'm a nurse practitioner, and I've been doing addiction medicine for the last 6 years. I started with opiate addiction, which is heroin, meth, and alcohol, and transitioned in 2020 to work at home, and I enjoy that. So I was working with alcohol addiction, and I have in the course of about a month, I had about 3 or 4 guys who said, "I no longer take this medication for alcohol. I take it because it keeps me away from porn." And that kind of floored me at first because there's so much shame around porn addiction. Like, who's just gonna say, "Yeah, I'm addicted to porn"? Like, that labels you as a pervert automatically. So I was thinking, like, how many guys are taking this for porn addiction and aren't telling me? And just saying, "Yeah, I'd rather be labeled as an alcoholic than a porn addict because there's less shame around it." So then I started looking up some medical journals. There's been several medical journals published around this medication to treat internet sex addiction, porn addiction, or generic sex addiction, and nobody's really talking about it. So then I was like, okay, well, I need to get a reference for my patients. Like, where can I send my patients to? Nothing. Nobody knows about this. Nobody's doing this. And I thought, well, who's going to go to their family doctor and say, "I have a porn addiction, can you help me?" And even if you did, how many family doctors are going to say, "Oh, I heard this medication helps"? Well, nobody. They're going to say, "Here, go to therapy," which I support. I love therapy. But there's just nothing out there. So talking with a colleague of mine, we decided we're going to partner with a nationwide telemedicine provider and provide this medication to all 50 states via telemedicine. So it's as anonymous as medicine can be, because we do have to have your name and some medical history to make sure it's safe. But it isn't like it's going to be in your family doctor's charts, and anytime you go to get a physical, you're wondering if the nurses looked at your chart. So we decided.
True, I didn't think about that.
Yeah, so we decided to provide just the medicine. I support therapy. Therapy is gold standard for addictions, but there's so many good therapy providers that I don't feel that there's a lack in that. There's a lack in education regarding medication. But I do get a lot of resistance when it comes to medication. And what was really surprising to me was most of the resistance came from the Christian crowd. And it was like,
Whoa.
"Oh, porn's not an addiction. You just need to pray more." And it was just, I just kept getting that message. Like, and I prescribe medication for a living, but I get it that people don't want medicine. I understand that. Less medicine, the better. I
Yeah.
support that. But if your life is teetering on the edge of falling apart, if your wife is going to leave you if you don't stop using porn, if you're a pastor and if you get
Yeah.
caught, you lose your career, you lose your family, you lose everything, and you've tried and failed to quit porn, well,
Yeah.
considering medication is an option for you. And so that's what we do. We started nox.net. It says no-x.net. And We provide telemedicine to all 50 states regarding, we do two different medications. So the first one, naltrexone, it's FDA approved for alcohol use disorder and opiate use disorder. So how it works for pornography,
Wow.
it works in three different ways. One, it makes a person less impulsive overall. Two, it helps to reduce intrusive thoughts about porn. It may not take all the intrusive thoughts away, but it helps to reduce the intensity and the number of times people just these thoughts come to you. And then the
Yeah.
third thing is it reduces the endorphin release from external stimuli. So typically the next follow-up question I get is, well, is it gonna limit the endorphin release from the good things in life, like having sex with my spouse, hugging my children, things like that? Short answer is no. It does differentiate between external and internal endorphin release. So how that helps with porn is you open up your laptop to check your work email, and then it's this Pavlovian response. Your brain says,
Yeah.
open computer, porn. It automatically starts releasing endorphins to get that snowball running, and then you get intrusive thoughts, and then it's a snowball. So
Yeah.
this helps to shut it down before that snowball gets too far.
Wow. And I know that in a lot of situations, let's swing to a different challenge, like clinical level depression, extreme depression. I understand that there have been studies that have been, I wouldn't say debunked, but they definitely have pulled back recently in what certain medicines help. And they basically say, and I'm oversimplifying this study, a placebo did 87.7% as good as the real. And to that I say, then take the placebo.
Yeah.
Because if it's going to trigger a response in you that you cannot, I'm not saying this medicine you're talking about is placebo, but I have people push back on medicine because they're like, well, how do you know it works? And I don't even know. And too much medicine. I do believe we have an over-medicated society to a point, but but that doesn't make me anti-medicine.
Right.
Because I think those of us that are about to drive our lives over a cliff, we need help.
Yeah.
And something or someone else has got to grab that wheel.
Yeah.
And for some of us, we are crying out to God every day.
Yeah.
We are asking God for help. And sometimes he's trying to help us, but we can't even hear his voice because we are so overwhelmed with life. And if medicine can grab the wheel and help you steer for a while until you can hear that voice, until you can gain that accountability and have that self-control, then by golly, take the medicine, please. Because God has created science, and I understand there's a lot going on right now in the world with opinion to big pharma. I'm not a fan. Right. I get it. But it doesn't mean true scientists aren't seeking truth, and it doesn't mean that all medicine is bad. Right. I'm not throwing my Tylenol out just because I don't like big pharma. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm keeping my Tylenol. I'm keeping my kids' ibuprofen. I'm not like, it's all evil. But I love that you're a Christian in this arena because there is a level of discernment. But how you discovered it sounds like it was brought to you. It wasn't as if you were pursuing this. So you're like, well, that's interesting. No. What an interesting nugget that you were able to find through your patients. And like you said, I also find it fascinating. They were more willing to be labeled an addict of alcohol and possibly drugs. I didn't hear you say drugs, but possibly, than pornography.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you tell us from a mental health perspective, even let's say someone, I'm going to be hypothetical here, listeners. Let's say someone comes to you and they know that you have dealt with porn addiction and they recognize that this is a problem and they aren't in denial. Right. They recognize they need help. They come to you. Are there common symptoms or common things that happen in a porn addict's life that is consistent, that maybe they took a very long time to notice, or unfortunately they're way more down that rabbit trail than some people maybe who are just starting down that? How do they know they're an addict versus what our society would call normal?
Right.
And I know in a Christian world, it's nothing, friends. We're not looking at porn. Right. But I'm saying, versus normal curiosity, accidental exposure versus an addict who, there are symptoms there.
Yeah, good. There's a couple different questions. So we'll start with the symptoms. That is one of the symptoms of pornography addictions are pretty vague. You get depression, social isolation, anxiety, things like that. But that's what makes pornography addiction so insidious. You can have an extreme pornography addiction and nobody around you knows it. As opposed to alcohol, cocaine, heroin, you're going to be intoxicated. People are going to pick up the symptoms on that. But this, it can go unseen for years. But how do you know if you're an addict? I get that question a lot. And you have to define what is an addiction. First, we have to define addiction. So I define addiction like this: doing something that's harmful to you, wanting to stop, but being unable to consistently stop doing that activity. So that could be the guy who looks at porn all day, every day. That could be the Christian who looks at porn twice a year and struggles with it because it goes against what he or she feels. And a good example, I treated a patient, a member of the worship team at church, would watch porn once a month and then hate himself after. And they go 6 months without porn and then slip up one night on Saturday night, then have to go up in front of church on a Sunday and then hate himself again for it. And this went on for 10 years. And then finally, we found each other and we started medication. It helped. I always say medication's a tool, but it's not that his scenario is not the typical addict you would say is a porn addict, watching porn once a year, twice a year. But if depending on what definition you use for an addiction, like the one I used, well, that falls into that addiction. And you mentioned earlier, most of the listeners are going to be Christians, so it's going to be very hard to find somebody who says, as a Christian, it's okay to watch porn. Yes. Now, if there's people, right. So
we're in a weird world right now, Isaiah. But I would hope they'd say this is clearly bad. Like, don't do this. Yeah.
Right. So now, if somebody's listening and they're not a believer and they say, I've been on a podcast, guy said, there's nothing wrong with porn. I watch porn. There's nothing wrong with it. And I said, I'm not here to tell you there is or there isn't. But here's some of the objective facts that you should know before consuming porn. Like pornography. It's the third most common form of sex trafficking according to the National Human Sex Trafficking Hotline.
It is.
So I told this guy, there's a chance some of the videos you watch, those people aren't willingly there. How does that make you feel? Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
And we changed the subject shortly after because that's awkward.
I don't want to answer these really hard questions. Yeah.
Right. Yes.
Well, and 87, I might be, I don't think I'm high. I might be a little low, but approximately between 83 and 87% of all porn videos show violent act towards women.
Yes.
Are you okay with that? Are you okay with 83% of those videos having a violent act towards a woman, and we tell our kids this is normal? Girls are thinking that should happen to them and they should accept that. And men are thinking it's okay to do that. Like, I don't think there's a lot of people that are going to say, oh, I'm fine with that, but they'll watch it. So. Right. And then what kind of subconscious message does that send? And you desensitize yourself to aggression and violence towards people. And that's not okay. And that's really one of the motivating factors that it took for me to said, let's go ahead and make this nationwide. Because I was treating patients myself in private practice locally. Wow.
And I have 4 daughters. And I got to thinking, how are my daughters going to find a spouse who isn't influenced by porn? So 98% of men have watched porn in the last 6 months. So that's 2%. Like, how do you find the 2%? And
I'm married to one. But it's really hard. People even say that. Accountability, it's really hard. Like, he's like, thank you, Lord, I've never been overly exposed to that. But he said he's the only man he knows. Like, he said he was in a small group of church. And he just said, honey, I'm the only one. And he said, and I'm so grateful. I'm humble. I'm not cocky about it. It could be, every day is a battle. He's like, but wow, you open those floodgates. And it is really hard to dam that water back up. Yeah. And along those lines, I mean, like you said, continue down that path. I interrupted you. I didn't mean to. You have 4 daughters. And 98% of the men, and I don't know what ages that is, but let's just say 21 and up as men. That is staggering amount of men who, whether they are wanting to be addicted or not, because let's face it, some people don't care. Like we all had that guy, not necessarily a friend, that they got drunk every weekend and we just knew who they were. We stayed away from them because we don't want to be around drunk people. But like, it didn't bother them. They thought it was I had people tell me, no, this is normal. This is fine. Everybody does it. You're the exception to the rule. And I remember thinking, I'm really not the exception to the rule, but I'm realizing more and more that people have to use that as a reason, an excuse to participate in, as what Christians call sin. Like, we know that's a sin. And even if you're a non-believer, just the fact that many people look at porn on a regular basis, that high of a percentage of people are watching something that's either from, human trafficking or a violent act towards a woman. What would you say is another sign? Because I know you linked, isolation, depression, a lot of things that could be tied to other things. Like, that's the thing is if your teenager's moody and isolating themselves and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, it's not always easy to see that. But if your spouse is starting to be moody or depressed, that certainly as a wife, not something I would want to jump to. Right. I wouldn't want to say, golly, honey, are you looking at porn? Maybe this is why you're so bummed out. Like, I'm just being honest. So from a spousal perspective, or let's say not your situation with daughters, even though women, ladies, you can get addicted to porn too. I've known women that have had to overcome that. So let's not pretend it's all the guys. As a father, as someone who says, okay, I'm being legitimate. I want to prepare teenage boys to live a life of integrity, because I would like some godly options for my daughters if they want to marry someone. If you were to teach a class on this to teenagers, what would you say to them? What are maybe 2 or 3 key points you would want to make that you would hope would leave an impact on their life concerning the reality of where porn can lead you?
So first thing I would say is porn is fake. And a lot of adults, a lot of us know that. A lot of teenagers, they don't realize. They supplement their sex education with pornography and think that this is real. This is how it's supposed to be. Well, it's fake. They call porn actors and actresses that for a reason, because they're acting. And porn separates sex from intimacy. It creates a void there between intimacy and sex. And the insidious part of the porn is it's always available. And your partner isn't always available. And nor should he or she be. It's not the way it's designed. But that's how these porn addictions get started. Had a bad day at work. Let me relax. Had a good day at work. Let me celebrate. I'm stressed. I have a big project. Let me celebrate, or let me relax. And it's a slippery slope.
Yeah. Wow. That could summarize the entire talk. We could end right there, because it's true. Porn is fake. It is a false intimacy. You can't have intimacy with pornography. We are wired for intimate relationships. Our society is being created, especially the last 20 years, to push us further away from intimate relationships. So when we can't access that intimacy, the lie of pornography is that this is almost as good. It's not even going to tell you it's just as good, but it's going to lie and tell you close enough.
It's easier.
It's easier. You don't have to develop relationships. I don't have to get to know you.
Relationships are hard.
Yes, they are. And you have to be honest enough to say, I'm hard. Like, other people are hard to have a relationship with because they're different than you. You know what? They might feel the same way about me, but I still want them to be my friend. So I need to give you, the closer you get to the Lord, the more you realize relationship is 90% giving. And if you're in healthy relationships, they feel the same way. They're giving, they're saying, hey, I'd rather do this, but I know they really love to do that. I'm just going to do what they want to do because I love them. And this puts a smile on their face. And I don't know that everybody fully understands that until they're a parent. You're a parent. I'm a parent. Yeah. But even in that parental role, speaking of parents that are listening, you have to create boundaries for your kids. I tell my parents, and this is me talking, I will not put Isaiah under the bus on this one, do not let your child walk into their room with a cell phone. they need to be in the open. They need to be somewhere that you can see them. Now, I understand there's, my son will ask, Mom, hey, I want to watch this thing. I'm practicing guitar. Can I take this in my room? Yes. He does not. It is not. No screens are allowed in their room when they go to bed, even if they've asked permission. They have a phone bank. I bank my phone because I'm trying to set an example for them. You do not need to take, I do not need, please, ladies, I'm not looking at anything fishy, but I stay up an extra hour if I take my phone into my room when I should be sleeping. But that to be said, if parents are saying, I don't know that my kids are into porn, I'm praying they're not, but how would you encourage a parent to either broach this conversation or create some boundaries in their house that's going to make it real hard for either a child to intentionally access porn or for, let's be fair, for porn to try to access your kid? That happens too.
Yeah. Sure. I always say there's a storm coming, let's grab an umbrella. We know what our society is, and we have to prepare our children for it. We have to give them the tools they need to fight. So, and hopefully it's not your child, but by age 14, 94% of children will be exposed to porn. So average age of first exposure is 11 years old. But here's one of the more staggering statistics. So out of all the porn consumed by pediatrics, 17 and under, 22% are consumed by children under the age of 10. So that's 8 and 9 year olds.
That literally makes me want to barf. Like, it's like
yes.
a visceral response as a mom. That crushes me.
Yes.
Because their brains cannot comprehend what's going on.
Right.
But their bodies get confused. Have you ever, in your experience with pornography, had to counsel a parent to, not in a mean way, but to kind of snap out of it? Like, I feel like there's some parents that I don't want to be rude enough to say it's intentional, but I've met several parents and I care about them enough to try to finesse a conversation with them and say, hi, I just need you to know that the world doesn't care that your child's in a Christian house. The world does not care that your child goes to soccer. The world is coming for them, and you need to prepare your child. And like you said, grab an umbrella, build some boundaries, because ignorance is not always bliss. And they aren't safeguarding their kids because they truly believe that being from a good family that goes to church on Sunday is enough to protect your kids. And in my experience, that's absolutely not true. But I don't want to speak to pornography addiction because I don't know this realm enough to speak to it. But what is your experience with working with parents who, and again, taking that shame piece off the table, who this is a shocker for them? Like, they're at home going, what? That's not possible. My sweet Timmy's right over there online or in his room. He's in my house. He's perfectly safe, Isaiah. He's fine. He's from a Christian house. He's never going to get into this. And this is a loving conversation, brother to sister, brother to brother, sister to sister. Who's ever listening to you, they're open. They don't listen to me unless they're open to honesty. What would be something you would want them to know? The reality is.
Yeah, like I said, the reality is there's a 94% chance your child is going to be exposed, whether it's at home searching for something innocent, whether they're at a friend's house or on the school bus. Like, that stuff happens. So it's almost never too young to start educating your children. So if a parent can't say penis and vagina in front of their children, or say it without giggling, well, how are you going to give your children these words if you can't say it yourself? So there's a good book I recommend, Good Pictures, Bad Pictures. And it's more for the younger, 6, 7, 8, 9, something like that. And it talks about good pictures and bad pictures. And then internet filters, and adult content blockers are a must. And obviously no unsupervised internet access. And then as the child gets older, I typically recommend switching from internet blockers to accountability software. And the reason being is let's allow your child to make those hard decisions themselves while we still have sway over them. while we can still influence them, as opposed to just wait until they're 18 and then they have no boundaries and
Shove
nobody's
them out the
watching
door
them.
and hope for the best. Like, I'm like, what are you doing?
Yes.
Yeah. Because I've heard the saying, you want your child to fail while they're at your house. You want them, not necessarily in this area, but you want them to feel freedom to come to you with their failures and say, I messed up, help me, I need help. Versus when they're out of the house and they feel like maybe they feel they are supposed to know how to handle it because they're adults, and you're like, but you're just 18, um, yeah, no. So internet blockers, I was keeping track of that, and then
Yes.
accountability
Yeah,
software.
internet blockers and accountability software, and then education for your child. So a proper sex education will help safeguard them from getting their sex education from pornography. So if they know what sex is really supposed to be like, they have those guards up for when most likely they're going to be exposed. They know this is acting, this is not
Yeah,
for real.
yeah,
Just like in an action movie, when somebody gets shot, though that person really didn't die, it's acting. So and then if your children are younger, give them the words. They're not going to know what pornography is, so give them the definition. This is what pornography is. This is what I expect you to do if you happen to see it googling something. If you're at Jim Bob's house and their older brother
yeah.
shows you, well, step one, call it what it is in your head, that this is pornography. Step two, turn around, look the other way, come home,
Yes,
talk to me. And you feel free to talk to me. And as parents, your job is not to freak out and call Jimmy's parents, start screaming at him, even though
yes.
you want
You
to.
would want to.
This is yes, you're because you want to protect your kids, of course. So your job is to make sure that they feel welcome to tell you this stuff, and you can't freak out and say this is not okay. I'm sorry it happened to you. Tell me how it made
Yeah,
you feel. Most kids, I was exposed to porn at 10, and I knew
yeah,
it was wrong in my gut. But it would look so cool. I liked it. I was a
yeah,
10-year-old boy. But I knew it was wrong. My gut told me. It's explained to your kids. This is God. This is your conscience telling you, hey, this
yeah.
isn't right. You need to listen to that voice, and that voice is going to guide you.
Yeah, and I think that's where a lot of parents don't we don't realize that we can equip our children for when this is going to happen. And to, number one, like we've been saying, take the shame off the table, keep the conversation open.
Yeah.
One thing that we tell our kids when they go to people's houses, I mean, obviously we're sending them to houses they know, that we know the parents and we trust, but we've always said, if there's any reason you want to come home, you just call us, we'll come get you, and you don't even need to tell us. If you're just like, I'm unsafe, I need to come home. So my son almost took us up on that once. He told us, but it wasn't pornography, but it was inappropriate talk. It was, the kids were just acting off. He didn't like how they were talking about their parents. He didn't like how they were talking about, but he said, I just didn't know what their parents would think if I asked them, because he respected the parents. He said, I felt like I would have to explain myself. And I said, buddy, you never have to explain yourself to anybody. If they are parents and they love the Lord, they will understand. It's your thing. So I feel like to tell kids they have the choice to leave that environment, even if it means mom and dad have to come and pick them up. I think what I've struggled with in the past, in the sense that I think God's called me on it, is my attitude has needed to be adjusted so that my children don't feel they are an inconvenience to me. So parenting is never convenient, friends. But I don't want my children to think that because I need to get work done, but they need a ride to go to their friend's house that they promised they would go work. Or like this morning, my son very sweetly volunteered for the youth group to help clean up someone's yard. That changed my schedule. But I was like, will not, I will not let him know this is a little inconvenient, because I want him to feel that he can call me to pick him up. He can ask me questions. He can come to me in the middle of the night with something that he just saw on the internet or that he saw that day and he wants to sort of confess. Um, if so, that open door of no shame, love, and then those boundaries you mentioned. Also, I wanna talk about parents who have either struggled with this in the past or who are getting help right now. I'm hoping you're getting help, or who after listening to this will get help. how do you, a lot of parents that I know that have struggled with alcoholism, or they were a rebellious teenager and they slept around, or honestly, they had an abortion or something pretty extreme in their background, they are actually very passive in those areas with their kids because they feel literally the lie that they believe, which I believe this is a lie that the enemy gives you, is they don't have the right to tell their kid to do something that they did themselves. What would you say to that parent who's has struggled with this or is struggling with this and feels like that right to tell their kid right from wrong has been taken away from them?
Yeah, good question. I typically get that or the opposite. That's a very common belief, but also the opposite is true. So if you struggle with alcohol, you want to be. My struggle was horrible. As a parent, you could say my struggle was really bad. I want to make sure that they don't make the same mistake as I did. So it can kind of go either way. So there's so much shame around pornography. So you don't have to tell your kids I struggled with it. They don't need to know. They don't want to know.
You guys, they don't want to know. They don't even. I'm not to be blunt, Mom. They don't even know Mom and Dad have ever had sex. Like, I mean, in their mind, they're like, obviously they had it 3 times. There's 3 of us. We're done. They never did it again. Yeah. They don't want to think of you as a human being with some sort of sexual, like, because God has given that to us, right? But they're like, not for Mom and Dad. I just want to pretend that doesn't exist.
Right. Yeah. Right. And that's okay, but it does need addressed, and it's I always tell people it's only awkward if you make it awkward.
That's true.
Talking to your kids about this. If you, like I said before, if a parent can't say penis and vagina in front of their kids, well, the kid has no chance, like of a proper sex education from their parent. So it's only awkward if you make it awkward, and so that's kind of the way I approach that.
Oh, Isaiah, this is so good. I have one more question for you, and then I know we need to go. I was just thinking of your daughters, and of course, one of my podcasts, this will be on 2 platforms. So if you're listening on the America Unchained platform, my other podcast is called Strong Christian Female. Your daughters are 4 women being raised intentionally to love the Lord. How would you explain to them, because pornography has become so normal, because pornography addiction isn't even all often identified as an addiction, and we know, you and I know, and this is not something we have time to go into, but I'm interviewing another counselor who will go into this more about how it changes your brain and how you literally look at the world differently because of the damage you've done to your brain. How would you encourage these women, these unmarried women, that do have the desire in their heart to be married, to wait for a man who has this area of his life under control before they marry the man? Because they feel like it's part of the bargain. What am I going to do? I'll just learn to deal with it. It's not a problem. We'll figure it out, because the lie in the culture is, well, once I'm married and can have sex, this addiction will leave, right? That's a tricky one. That's such a lie, you guys. Yeah. It's like if I diet, this is going to sound like a flippant, example, but if I diet to fit in my wedding dress, I will forever keep that 50 pounds off. Like, sorry, friends, that's just not how that goal is not a lifestyle. So if your daughters, imagine your daughters are all, of marrying age, what would you encourage them? How would you encourage them to, I don't know how I want to word the question, because you guys, I have sons. I love the men. I'm pro man. But to wait until that man is ready to honor you fully for the beauty that covenant relationship, that sex relationship is going to have. Not, you've seen good outcomes. We are all for healing, but wait for the healing. How what would you say to your daughters about this?
Yeah, first have that awkward conversation. If you are dating someone, have that awkward conversation. Have you ever looked at porn? What do you think? How often? When was the most recent time? Or do you think it's okay? If not, what are you doing to prevent that? Because I find the biggest thing to keep keeps you away from porn is starting the anti-porn business, right? I can't be the guy who watches porn now.
Yeah.
It's not even an
Yeah.
option for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that kind of comes from the 12 steps. The 12th step is helping someone else. So what are you doing daily to stay away from that? Because motivation fades. Motivation for that will fade, and getting married doesn't help. If anything, it'll make it worse because your expectations of having sex every day, all day, every day is up here, and then when that doesn't happen, you're like, okay, now what?
Yeah, and just like you said, pornography gives that false lie, right? Of this will satisfy, this will gratify, this is true relationship, but only true, deep, intimate, covenant relationship will satisfy, not flippant, wham bam, thank you, ma'am, pornography. What I feel like you just said is accountability. Accountability is something I think the church does mention on occasion when it comes to certain things. I think this is really one of the few realms I've actually heard anyone even mention it. But other people I know who are like in a men's small group, or they're the associate pastor at a church, and even if they didn't struggle with it, they want the world to know they're being held accountable, and so they're more of an open book. But I also would say, I guess I'll ask you this. I have my opinion, but I don't want to share it. Who should they be? I love turn around and help someone else, right? You helping someone else is going to help you stay accountable. But who looking forward should you be accountable to? Because I feel like you being accountable to your fiance might not be the best person.
Right. Yeah, and I hear that often. I love the idea of accountability. Definitely necessary. It just has so much negative stereotype in our church that, like, oh, if you have an accountability partner, that means you struggled with porn. Yes.
But prevent the bankruptcy before the money's gone. Like, just get somebody to hold you accountable. Like, I have people hold me accountable to certain things. Because it was a problem. I'm over it, but I'm like, I never want to go there again. My husband holds me accountable to what I spend. Like, I mean, we're not bankrupt, but I'm like, well, someone's got to look at the checkbook too. Just let someone check your checkbook. Like you might not be overspending. You may haven't overspent 20 years, but you're correct. That is an excellent point. Weirdly, even though it is a biblical facet of the church to be held accountable, it does have a negative connotation that being held accountable means you have a problem. How would you
had a problem,
or you can never get healed from this thing? Like, you once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. I'm like, well, maybe you're not an alcoholic, but you don't want to go back. How would you take the negatives? How would you define the true the positive accountability you should have in your life?
I think accountability shouldn't just be for pornography. It should be for growing your relationship with Christ. You should have somebody there who's checking in on you and saying, hey, when was the last time you read your Bible? Or, hey, this is what I read. What are your thoughts? And then that person's also willing to have those conversations. Like, how is that? Any temptations for porn recently? And sure, that's awkward the first couple of times, but it gets okay.
It's easier.
So, right, and most women don't like to be the accountability partner, and I'm okay with that. And so, most of the time, men and women approach the problems differently, and that's understandable why they wouldn't want to be. So, oftentimes it's men helping men, and somebody who's like-minded to you, who's motivated by the same things you are. So going to church, we have a bigger church, and a lot of the guys, I went to the men's meeting, a lot of the guys are just there to socialize. And finally I found somebody who's there, like, to the men's group, who actually wants to talk about the Bible and not about the football game coming up. And so, like, him and I connected. Yes.
That's why I started this podcast. So, my listeners know. I'm like, listen, I started this podcast because I couldn't find anybody. And I was like, well, Lord, you've been in my life my whole life. I know a lot about you. I'm just gonna start. Let's just talk. Let's open this conversation. Open the airwaves to talk about the Lord, because He should be a big part of what you want to talk about in life. I love that. I love that. and this is true in everybody's life, whether it's your finances, whether it's your struggles with gaining and losing weight all the time, whether it's how you treat your kids, whether it's how you treat your spouse, whether it's, are you dating your spouse? Are you doing this? Accountability should not be because there's a problem. It should be because you never want to have these problems. And if we can take the stigma out of that word in the church, that is awesome. Because what I was told by someone once who had overcome alcohol, and it had been 25 years. I mean, they'd been out of that temptation for a long time. He said, when people used to come to the AA meetings late, we were just happy to see them there. We were so happy they were there. But when people come to church late, everybody has a problem and wonders why they didn't prioritize their time. What if we just didn't make assumptions and we're just happy to see them there? And I feel that way about accountability. We have to stop making assumptions about people who are willing to be held accountable, because in the business world, they don't call it accountability. They call it coaching. Right. They call it, other fancier, cooler words. And we're like, oh, that's awesome. You have a coach for that. Man, that'll preach all day, Isaiah. That is just awesome. Before we go, I know, again, ladies, all this information is below. I mentioned it in the beginning, but is there somewhere, if they want to learn more, and I know you have your telemed. Telemed's tricky. I know a lot of times you can't take out of state folks, but is there a way people can reach out to you if they have a question or a concern, or maybe they want to have you speak? I don't know. I mean, you're such an eloquent speaker, and you have just this very calming demeanor. Maybe it's because you're a father of 4 women. It's been beaten into you to just take a breath and deliver the information with as much calm as possible. But let us know how to get in touch with you.
Yeah, so you can always go to no-x.net, and you can go click on our story, and you can book a free 10-minute consultation with myself or my partner. She's also a nurse practitioner. We both have our calendars open completely for free. You can click the contact us button, and that email goes directly to me as well.
Awesome. And I don't know if your services are available for counseling, but obviously if they bring their faith with them, those that are listening that have a faith in Jesus, I know you're someone that you're comfortable with that. So I love that. You were able to jump on with us today. Isaiah, such good stuff. And I know a lot of people have had a lot of questions about this, and sometimes they're just afraid to start asking questions because there's assumptions out there. We've got to take the stigma out of the sting out of this, because it's here, and we've got to approach it. And I just feel like we can't do what we're supposed to do in this generation until this vice is off of the church, and it never will be if we don't talk about it. So thank you for being here, and please keep us updated on any changes. I'll make sure to update that on the podcast in the future.
Thank you so much for having me.